Everybody, welcome to the 2 o'clock panel. We are talking multi-cloud. Stu Miniman. I am an analyst with Wikibon and a host of theCUBE, which is a live video program. We're doing 3 days of broadcast here at VMworld. It's my 9th year at VMworld. I actually have been working with VMware since 2002 on my nice little V All-Star card from last year that Rubrik put out. You know, I said I started working with ESX 1.5.2, so hopefully I have a little bit of geek cred, but I'm an analyst, so most of you people say that I don't know anything. That's why I'm moderating, because I'm good at asking questions, and what I really want to do is I want to get my panel talking, and I want to get you engaged. So we're here to give you the best multi-cloud experience that you're going to have this week. So I'll have a couple of questions to get us started, but please jump on in. And good questions. We actually have swag to give you. So Fumula has been so nice to bring some limited edition Microsoft Azure certs. We have stickers. So you will want to ask us questions and get involved, and you will be codified on this lovely video that lots of people will watch after. So just to set up the context, there are a couple of ground rules. We're talking about multi-cloud. Please don't ask definitional questions about what is or isn't in hybrid and multi-composite and things like that. We've got people, we're going to talk about the reality of what's going on here. So we've got people that have worked as practitioners, we've got end users, we've got people that have been out there and helping. We want to talk about what's really happening out there, what's good, what's bad, and everything out like there. So with that ground rule out of the way, I want my panel to introduce themselves, so I've got something for you. I want your name, tell us what you do, and then also tell me the coolest thing that you're seeing people doing like with this whole cloud thing lately. And just because I'm asking you a question, I'll set it up real quick, so I'll talk for a second. I'll try not to talk too much during this panel, but I've been involved in this cloud stuff since early days. I worked on what we call private cloud first, but dug heavily into the public cloud stuff. Last couple of years, I've been digging into the serverless stuff. And I went to a little serverless conference in San Francisco last month, and I found marketing people that are super excited because they don't need to learn all of the coding stuff. They can actually learn enough to start building application. And they're like, I'm kind of a developer, but I'm not even a coder, but I can do things that I can build without even really needing to know all the underlying stuff, which is really cool, I think. So, Fumula, if you'd start us off.
So I'm also known as Exchange Goddess. In addition to Fumula Schmidt, I work for Microsoft. I'm a cloud advocate. And I'm on week number 5. So I actually came from the customer world. And a cool thing about cloud is that businesses, customers, pretty much they can do anything within a couple weeks. Before, it would take forever to develop an application. Now, like you were saying, wow, I have this idea and I want to, make this application. Within a couple weeks, they're up and running and business is booming. It's amazing from start to finish what businesses can do now with cloud.
Yeah, right. I love that, Fumula. Right, it used to be, the line I heard once is, give me $1 million in 12 to 18 months and I'll build you the Taj Mahal. Well, no, I've got no budget and no time. Can we do something? Yeah, really cool. Josh.
So my name is Joshua Stenhouse. I'm a technical advisor at Rubrik. Despite the accent, I'm based on the US East Coast. I spent 7 years an end user, working up from climbing behind desks and fixing printers to infrastructure to then technical services in the channel, and then the last 6 years I spent 5 at Zerto and a year and a half since at Rubrik. So I'm about half a year off officially being on the dark side, in my opinion. And I think the cool thing I've seen in the last few years is that I've gone from talking to a lot of organizations where you say the word cloud and they say, we are not touching that, that is not for us, and it's insecure, we can't look at it, to the point now where I'm starting conversations and the customer's saying to me, we want to start using it, we have to start using it, and the best use case is always removing that secondary site, be it for disaster recovery, for off-site copies of backups, and that's my personal mission in this world, is to everyone keep the on-premises VMware that we know and we love and we can manage and has the performance and the low latency, but kill the whole notion of a DR site altogether, a physical one.
Cool. Brian?
So I'm Brian Knutson. I'm a cloud technologist for iLand. So we do essentially cloud services. So infrastructure as a service, DR as a service, backup as a service, amongst a bunch of other things that can be done on top of those. My history, I've been on every side. I've been a customer, I've been a VAR, I've been on the vendor side now for about 4 years, now starting up as a service provider. And I guess for me, I don't know how real cool it is, but for me, the whole DR as a service has always been really exciting to me. When I was on the VAR side, we actually got acquired and got put into a large organization that had a public cloud and stuff. And as soon as I saw that and was building on-premises solutions for customers, I'm like, why not have them replicate to us? We have the infrastructure to do that, and they can just sit there and make us money while they're waiting for their disaster to occur. And customers loved it. I sold it to a couple customers. And so that's really kind of going to be my focus now at iLand, is to focus on that piece of the
Brian,
puzzle.
you left out one of the most important pieces of your CV there. You are also, first of all, it's his first time on a panel, but if it wasn't for Brian and some of the other folks here, we wouldn't be here. So thank you once again, VM Underground. I'm always happy to be able to support and participate.
Thank you.
All right, David?
My name is David Burton. I work for a large healthcare organization. We are a payer provider in Western Pennsylvania, so not a vendor. Always been a customer. I've been a customer for the last 10 years. So one of the biggest challenges we've seen with bringing hybrid and multi-cloud into our environment is the separation of education between leadership and IT. So challenge number one, make sure you're well educated, because the salesmen coming to talk to executives about what on-premise cloud looks like versus public cloud, there's a huge shift in what your leadership believes about your cloud consumption and what IT believes about it. So knowing your numbers is valuable, knowing what's available is valuable, but also starting rapidly and being able to fail fast, we found also to be extremely valuable. And in our organization, we don't have the luxury of writing our own software. We buy software off the shelf. So we had to figure out how to bring hybrid cloud into our environment and make it financially viable, and that's a challenge. But most importantly, like I said, I think for us, we needed to understand what the executives were hearing and know our numbers and our costs so that everything was clear and wide open, so we had a strategy and an approach.
Thank you. Jim?
I'm Tim Jabut. I'm a solutions architect with VMware. Is this fading in and out? It's okay? Sorry about that. They told me this mic was flaky. So I'm an embedded solutions architect for VMware. I'm actually embedded into IBM, so I'm very familiar with IBM Cloud, as well as their global technology services. Coolest thing with technology or with multi-cloud strategy is there is no one cloud anymore. I mean, customers are setting the requirements and the edicts, the demands, just like they want a two-vendor policy. Most of the large customers, the large enterprise customers, want at least a minimum of a two-cloud vendor policy as well. The key to all of this, the secret sauce, is going to be in software-defined networking, and that's where we add a lot of value. So that's about it.
Thanks, Tim. Great. Yeah, software-defined networking. Come on, Pat Gelsinger said, that networking will be for the next decade or two what, the base virtualization was for VMware for a couple. So Brian actually did a real good job writing a blog post that got me excited to talk about this, this topic in general, because public cloud, remember, swipe a credit card, it's super easy, and if you find today, cloud in general is complex. The joke I've used is, if I was to go build a compute instance on Amazon or build a server on Dell.com, Lenovo, or anything like that, I think Amazon's got more options and probably need to understand a little bit more to do it. So it's complex, and the other thing I'd say is that when you've all been users, I hear that there's a stat, 80% of users now have a cloud strategy. Well, I've talked to a lot of users, and first of all, the strategy, the ink's still drying on it, and it's more, well, they did this, and they did this, and they did this, and we're kind of living with all this. So it's almost like we've redone what we did at the data center with the cloud. So multi tends to be, well, I've got a lot of stuff. So I'm going to want to start down at the end. Tell us, what are this thing that we have called multi-cloud, either your environment or if you're working with customers, what are you seeing? What are the real challenges that they're having with this thing that they ended up with? I hear things like cost or things like that, but just whatever is, what's some of the biggest challenges that they have because they've got this stuff?
Expectations, customers' expectations. The problem is there's so much misinformation out there. Customers have this expectation that cloud is easy. Well, yeah, if you want to stand up a single VM on Amazon, Google, you name, pick your flavor. Pumala and I were talking earlier. I mean, I stood up an Azure VM last night on the flight from 36,000 feet. Setting up a single VM is easy. Linking it all together, tying in governance, compliance, automation, and orchestration of all your entire tool chain, that's where the real value is, and that's where it's difficult.
All right. Do you want to jump in, please?
Yeah.
We don't need to go up and
So
down the line.
With,
So
with multi-cloud, so if you've got multiple clouds, you want those clouds to talk to each other. And I strongly believe customers are having that. That's the pain point. How do we get all these clouds to talk to each other? Because they should, just like your business. If you have different business units, you should all talk and collaborate. Those systems should all be able to tie into each other and work collaboratively to get to that end result. So as a multi-cloud environment, you want to find solutions that can make that chatter along the network talk, if that's the right word. The automation portion of how do we get all our clouds to talk to each other?
wait, you're not saying Kubernetes, Istio, all that stuff, Silver Bullet, solve all those
all
things?
that stuff
No?
is all that stuff is great, but at the end of the day, we want all the clouds to talk to each other. When you're in an enterprise, it doesn't matter where the clouds are at. Honestly, it doesn't matter. What matters is the end result, that application, that service. The person sitting at the computer just cares about that report that's spitting out to them.
Yeah, look, Brian brought up even, data protection, not the sexiest of things. We've got some cool companies doing stuff in that space, but
Very cool.
cloud, it can be a real problem if you don't do this right.
Yeah, and part of the problem is that there are so many and they are so different, and trying to get them to work. I consider Office 365 in an environment and some Amazon stuff in an environment a multi-cloud environment. And there may be reasons that they need to talk to each other directly. And that may be something that a company has come up on, and they're the first ones that have to solve that problem. And they may have to code something and put something into place and ensure the governance and the communication, all that kind of stuff as well, to make sure that those can work properly. And a lot of it, Tim mentioned the software-defined networking aspect of things. That's huge. That is why that is so big, is because of this multi-cloud and trying to get all these different pieces to work together, having that software-defined networking to be able to connect them together and be able to understand how the traffic's moving around without having to understand the underpinnings of, well, it's bouncing around to this data center through these routers all around here to get where it's going.
Well, and Stu brought up too, you had mentioned Istio, and yes, Istio and Envoy, those are definitely very good future technologies, but we've got to get to an all-kube world for that to really take place. I don't know about anybody else, but all these enterprise customers, maybe 5 to 10% are actual cloud-native apps or born on the web. How many companies are born on the web, right? If you start talking Istio, you're talking layer 4 through 7. So many legacy customers are way below that, and they've got thousands of applications through mergers and acquisitions that you're talking a decade of redevelopment time.
Thank you. I want to put a pin in applications for a second, because that's the whole reason.
That's a whole other thing.
Data and applications, kind of the whole reason infrastructure is here. But just David, Joshua, do you want to comment more on what we were putting a bow on that last conversation?
I want to talk about something that was, I guess, not take my IT geek hat off for a moment and comment about operationally what kind of impact it has on people. We found that without people interested and passionate about developing and working in hybrid cloud space, we really had struggles. We actually had to seek out in our organization people who wanted to work in a public cloud space, people who were excited to shift. So we had to find champions within our organization who were willing to adjust, and that helped quite a bit. We found the engineers who wanted to work on the technology and the application owners and vendors who were willing to partner with us, and that allowed us to kind of compartmentalize small pockets of IT and areas of staff that really wanted to work and accelerate getting into a hybrid cloud model. We also, one of the other big challenges we had was a lot of our executives thought it was a button push. Just hit the button and move our services to the cloud. So we tried to build that perception by offering a very small button and starting small, allowing us to fail quickly and identify what was needed. One of our initial strategies was separation of the infrastructure as a service away from platform as a service, because creating a new email account could definitely give us a, hey, you have a cloud service now, there's a button. It doesn't mean you necessarily need to go build 1,000 servers and lay down applications at the same time, because there can be different strategies between your application cloud services versus your infrastructure cloud services. So trying to separate executives and give them enough education to know what IT is doing was a huge help for us.
And the one thing I'd add there is, for me, it comes down to what is the most appropriate use case for using cloud for that technology. And a great example for me, if I go back to 2008, I looked at a SaaS-based or cloud-based service before anyone even used the term. And it was Mimecast email filtering that did 7-year retention, and they filtered it in their cloud service before it was then forwarded to your on-premise Exchange server, without even knowing I was consuming the cloud, and really just changing some MX records. I was now using a cloud service and had a cloud strategy, as it were, without actually making any wholesale changes to my environment. It just plugged in and go. And I think that for a lot of traditional enterprise IT environments is the way to go. You're not going to rewrite all your applications. You're not going to lift and shift and have them all networked in the cloud. You've got to take the small things bit by bit until you've got this truly hybrid environment.
All right, I'm pulling, as I said, we've got swag, giveaways for some good questions here. I'll keep asking. I'll get them talking amongst themselves too if we don't have any. But
can I ask a question and get swag?
Please, Brian. Am
I
allowed to
don't have
answer
one.
then?
I just want to know.
Please.
I'll think of one.
Oh, okay.
I don't have one
I
right now.
thought you had a question.
Oh, okay.
No.
You just
I
want to know
if it's worth thinking
yeah,
of a question.
sure. But Brian, this year, we can break the fourth wall. We can all ask questions of each other. It's all good. So we've talked about applications. I heard like cloud native, and I want to get your take on how this kind of the changing application. Applications are changing. We're going to microservices and all this stuff and everything. But at the same time, most enterprises have hundreds, if not thousands, of applications. I said actually Microsoft did us all a favor. They're pushing everybody to Office 365 as hard as they can. That was a green light to everyone that say SaaS as much as you can. If my business application of Microsoft there, green light. But still, this is what I call the long pole in the tent. 5 years from now, 10 years from now, we're going to still talk about our applications. What are we lifting and shifting? What are we moving? So when we think about multi-cloud, how does this application journey, what are you seeing? What's working? What's not? Is lift and shift a good thing?
I don't think lift and shift is a good thing. That's just from personal experience working in the customer world. It's very painful. Yeah, you can lift and shift and you're like, oh crap, now I got to fix because everything is broken. Slow migrations just seem to be the better way to go in the long run because you're not constantly putting
if I can, let me throw one more thing on top. What about like the VMware on AWS or things like that? Is that part of this whole application migration? Do I put it there? Because like my take is like lift and shift. If step one is lift, shift, and then I need to refactor and start pulling things apart, you can modernize the platform and then modernize the application, which I can do in my data center. There's many paths to get there.
It depends.
So, yeah.
It depends on your organization, your business requirements, your needs, and how fast you actually need to get to the cloud. If you've got certain circumstances that, okay, my data center is going to shut down, I need to move everything out. Okay, then lift and shift is probably it. Or you have an application that is 20 years old. You don't know who the developer is anymore. They may have died.
Wait, that Windows NT thing that I shoved in a VM long ago and it's still running?
Yeah. The legacy payroll system that still runs, and once a year somebody goes in it. It's stuff like that where you're like, okay, what time frame do I have? If you have some time, you may want to do that migration, but if you're stuck in a crunch, you may need to do the lift and shift. Sometimes it happens.
Yeah, we've seen lift and shift actually. It's got to be a strategy, right? I mean, it's got to be something that is driven. We've had some joint IBM customers, for instance, who wanted to get out of the data center business. They didn't want their own data center anymore at all. They didn't want to purchase new hardware when they were coming up on the end of their amortization time frame for their current hardware. It was the easiest thing to do was lift and shift to the cloud. What they ended up having as a byproduct of that is they were running on 4 or 5-year-old hardware. When they moved it to the cloud on new next-gen hardware, their applications sped up orders of magnitude. Not a single line of code was modified.
Yeah, and those of us that have been around through the whole virtualization flip, that's a pretty big deal, and I think we're coming up on an equally big pivot point with this. I, as a customer, went through and I literally wrote out a spreadsheet of all of the applications we had in our environment. And I said, which ones make sense to lift and shift from a physical to a virtual, P2V? Which ones make sense for us to completely redo. You know, maybe we need to reconsider this package that we're using because it's been there for 5, 10 years. Nobody knows how to manage it. So maybe we need to replace the functionality of the application itself. And then somewhere in between, there's maybe we need to refactor that Exchange server because it needs, you know, we know that there's a better way to do it because of the 3 upgrades we've done have put us in a completely different version of Exchange. So I think it's important to not assume that everything should lift and shift or everything needs to go cloud native. It's a matter of going through and figuring out what each of the different pieces are doing, and if it can benefit. You know, I may get a 10% increase by simply moving that SQL Server to the cloud, but I may be able to get a 25% increase by shifting the code around and doing something different with it and writing it in a cloud native way.
Right, but that's a much larger transformative process, right? I mean, it's so if the question is lift and shift or rewrite the code, I think everybody would love to go cloud native. But the reality is,
it's not easy.
It's a very long road.
Yeah, for sure.
Question out here.
Please. All right. So the question for those that didn't hear it is: are there things that scare you away from the cloud? And the thing I'd say is, of course, multi-cloud, and does include private cloud and things like that. But please, welcome.
I've got one. You know, I saw somebody trying to move Exchange into EC2 instances. Like,
Are you for real?
I'm for real. I'm for real.
Don't do that.
Yeah. Don't do that around me.
They said because they couldn't manage their own encryption keys in Office 365. Sorry.
Wow.
Oh dear.
Yeah. And I mean, how many of us actually think that Office 365 is just Exchange with a pretty interface on front of it? They didn't just lift and shift Exchange.
That's all I know about it, and it seems to work.
That's all we should know about it. We should just assume that
You
it's
don't want
that.
to know any more about it.
There was a fear. My company. Can you guys hear me?
No.
No. Low battery. Low battery.
Tech support. Tech support.
Executives came and said, "We need you to lift and shift, and save money while you do it." and the numbers didn't add up. The lift and shift, they said these need to be on, these infrastructure, these Windows and Linux servers need to be moved off of on-premise on the equipment that you already own to the cloud, and I need you to save money in the process. And it was impossible to do that. So that was a fear. What we did to compensate was find the workloads that are transient. So the lift and shift for us was, no, we're not going to move what we already have built. We're going to take the workloads that make it very difficult for us to maintain in the data center, the ones that are coming and going. They last for 30 days, 90 days. We know they're going to be short-lived, and maybe they can even be powered off at night and on weekends. And we don't have to pay for them like we would on site. We were able to satisfy executives by lifting and shifting some of our development workloads that prevented our on-premise capacities from fluctuating, which caused production impact, and moved those to the cloud, made our executives happy, saved us some. Most of our focus was on the PaaS services, but for IaaS, we were able to satisfy that. So the scariest thing is when an executive asks you to do something that's not right.
Oh my God. Yeah.
Consume that.
You've got Dilbert comics to show them, and like hello outsourcing. Do we remember what a mess that was for everyone? But yeah, and I love FUD, or fear, or what's
who
the,
actually thinks
bad
that cloud is
expectation?
cheaper? I mean, the reality of it. I mean, who actually thinks that it's cheaper?
I do, and actually I'll link it back to the previous use case. The number one use case for lift and shift is a disaster, because you go from needing 0 compute, RAM, horsepower in a DR site and IOPS to now you've got to run all of your VMs. And that's why the cloud was created in the first place, for that burst capacity that they then leased out. DR is the number one burst capacity lift and shift use case. And in that circumstance, the cloud, every TCO I've done does save money, because whatever you're paying for on-premises infrastructure in 2 sites, just cut it in half.
So
I'll give you that one.
Well,
yeah.
I want to highlight
here. So our panel's about multi-cloud. So here's a question. Amazon says you should do everything on them, because if you won't have the buying leverage if you start splitting up. We all know with every vendor, the more you do with them, in theory you should get discounts and everything like that. So we could talk public cloud versus on-prem, but multi-cloud, cost, security, data protection, don't all those things become tougher? Am I, when I'm spreading my chips all over the table, I'm not going to get as big of a bang? You know, how does multi-cloud fit into this discussion that we're having about fear, uncertainty, cost?
Well, it's more complex.
I
mean, it's definitely more complex.
Yeah.
And you know, I really don't think there's going to be no expert that knows about every single cloud. I mean, just the complexity. You're going to have different departments. You're going to have your AWS department. You're going to have your Azure department. You're going to have your Google. You're going to have your IBMs. And then those teams need to get together and they need to talk. And we all know how, you know, companies run. Sometimes we don't always talk.
Oh, yeah.
And they're silos.
Right.
And things are going to break down. And it's one of those
we-
things where if you're going to have
are we
multi-cloud.
rebuilding the silos? We had storage expertise and
Yes.
network
Yeah.
expertise, and you know,
Absolutely.
I knew this type of blade server well, and now I have to have my GCP, my Azure, my AWS.
So your experts, your departments are now going to have to talk to each other and say, what are you doing in your cloud? Here's what I'm doing in my cloud. Let's make sure we're doing stuff, you know, at the same rate, so we're not, you know,
So
competing against each
Joshua,
other.
Joshua, put you on the spot. You've got solutions that span across all these.
Yep.
You know, what are you seeing out there? Is it you're seeing a lot of differences? We
you know,
don't
if-
have a commodity or utility from cloud.
So a couple of things. If I had $100 for every time I've spoken to a customer and they've said, I'm looking at both or I'm using them both, then I probably wouldn't need to be here. I'd just sit on an island somewhere. And then the other thing I'd say is, you know, the likes of any cloud vendor, especially like an Amazon saying, you know, put it all in with us, you'll have more leverage. You know, even if you spent a reasonable amount of money, like say $1 million a year with Amazon, in comparison to some of their SaaS customers, that is peanuts. It's a rounding error. It doesn't actually give you any leverage whatsoever. And when you get to that sort of scale for running your actual infrastructure, then it does make more sense to, over a 3 or 5 year TCO, to bring that back on premises anyway. But I generally see people stick to around 1 or 2, because you can go crazy. You can go 5, 6, 7, 8. It's usually 1 or 2 for multiple different use cases, and quite often it's, you know, most customers, it's Office 365, Azure AD, Azure for the infrastructure team, and then Amazon for the new next-gen apps from the developers.
What about Salesforce?
Yeah.
Ooh.
Well,
Well,
yeah,
there's-
everybody's got Salesforce.
Yeah, that's cloud.
For
What,
any-
what, what about,
It's
what about
SaaS.
ServiceNow?
oh,
Yeah.
so
So that technically
And
that's
then,
cloud,
and
all
I've got
those
that,
need to
that
talk.
cool data application that I'm doing in Google because
know,
nobody
CRM?
else has smarter things
there's
there.
some,
Yeah,
don't get me
but
wrong,
yeah.
there's some others there, but the interesting thing is if you go and work for a startup, the startups that I've worked for the last 2 years don't use any on-premises VMs.
Right.
It's all SaaS-based and in the cloud, yet we're selling these solutions for the legacy apps.
All right.
I think part of the
Hold on,
the
David, did you have a
multi-cloud
comment
strategy.
there? I just wanted you to jump in there if you had a comment.
Me?
No, David. No.
Oh, Dave.
Did you?
I always have a comment.
Please. go on, and we do have a question from the audience after, but go ahead and give your 2 cents here on the multi-cloud and challenges. And
Yeah, a lot of challenges. I think where we see a lot of issues for us is, I guess, understanding the quantity and use cases that public cloud can be consumed. I think actually, to be honest, I don't remember the context of the original question. Help me out. What were you I phased out a little bit. What were you guys talking about? I had a hard time hearing you, actually.
It's so just hybrid cloud and, you know, the context for using it and how many you should use and why and what complexities does that introduce.
wouldn't it be simpler just to use one?
Yeah.
You know, one cloud to rule them all?
We chose to do that, but what we found was some of the software development areas, they wanted to go off and do their own thing. And they decided to go play with Google, and they decided to go play with AWS. But our security teams had a different idea of what they wanted to do. So like you had stated, we had to start splitting up and make each technology group that's doing their development in their own public cloud to come up with their own infrastructure team and their own security groups and their own level of education. And guess what happened a year later? They came back to corporate IT and said, we can't do this. We want to move to the cloud platform you're running on. So they learned. It was very difficult. And this was over the last 2 years. They spent a year hiring people, developing expertise on AWS, and then some of their division wanted to move to Google. And then corporate IT had moved to Azure. And so we had split across all 3. And one of their groups did. It was too complex. They couldn't continue to manage. And they wanted to come back to corporate IT. And the expertise that was developed, and we did. We decided as a corporate IT to stick with one public cloud provider.
Your story is very reminiscent of my previous employer, healthcare insurance company. We did sort of the same thing. You know, we had AWS, we had some stuff out from Google, and then infrastructure teams had Azure.
But I think a lot of it is going to be driven as well from the services that you're choosing to incorporate as well. We'll take Watson Cognitive Services, for instance. If you're embedding Watson Cognitive Services, you know that you have to leverage IBM's cloud. You can't go to another provider. Same thing if you're using Route 66 for DNS. You've got to use Amazon. I mean, it's the service offerings that your developers choose to leverage is going to dictate the clouds that you have to be on.
Okay. Question from the audience. Thank you.
Well, one thing we haven't mentioned, of course, is lock-in. There's a certain large like AWS, where UK broadcast has a large amount of data inside AWS, can't move away because the cost of the egress.
Data gravity. And
so are there other clouds that have other lock-ins, and why don't we consider the cost of getting back on-prem, moving to another cloud? Because the whole point is you've got multi-cloud, you should be able to move sideways. If you've got lock-in, how do you move? So are there other cloud providers that have the same sort of lock-in?
So if I could only hear bits and pieces. Sound like data movement and the costs of that.
And cloud lock-in.
Yeah, and lock-in.
Vendor lock-in in general, especially if you start building a life cycle around the APIs and automation of each infrastructure cloud that you're orchestrating with. It's a challenge for your dev shops to move from cloud to cloud, and a challenge for your IT shops.
Yeah, my company, we've got a development team, and they're like, I love my Amazon stuff. I don't want to have to report that code and do that everything. I mean,
Terraform. Sorry, yeah. I got to put a plug in there.
Yeah.
Terraform.
Right.
It works with all the clouds, and it can talk.
But data movement's tough and expensive. So
it is.
I mean, yeah, we could spend another hour talking about. We just put out a big report talking that 90% of the data will never leave the edge, because that's where it is and that's where it'll process. And even Amazon's pushing that way, Google, Microsoft, everybody understands that. But,
isn't that the cost of running multi-cloud?
Data moving.
Isn't that the cost of running multi-cloud? I mean, that's the price that you pay when you have multi-clouds.
Yeah, and I think this ties into bits and pieces we've talked about before on. It's important to really analyze what you're doing and making sure you know what you're doing before you make that leap into the cloud, so that you don't have to, try to pull everything out and move it somewhere else again. Going into it with eyes wide open, really thinking about the TCO aspect of things before you do anything, so that you know what it's going to cost. And if there's advantages or disadvantages to that, the organization can discuss that and understand that properly, and also know, hey, if we do make a mistake, what's the cost to pull back from that, or to DR to somewhere else. Again, when we think about DR is about moving data. And that should be a part of any solution you put together. What are we going to do if Amazon goes down? You could say Amazon never goes down, but we all know better. And what are we going to do in that case? Well, that may be your migration if something doesn't work the way you expect it to, and you need to understand what those costs are going to be in either case.
But Brian, it's your fault for not architecting your application properly to be able to deal through that, right?
Well, yeah, I'll take that responsibility for everybody.
I agree with you, though. I think it's the cost of cloud. You have to decide as an organization, and as you're working through application development and cloud, I guess the distribution of your applications across your clouds, data locality is significant. Latencies need to be understood. You can't develop the application on one platform and have your storage on another and expect performance to be consistent. It needs to be well thought out.
And just to add to that, there are cloud providers that don't charge egress, and cloud connectivity options to public clouds that remove egress charges. So it is just something that could come down to contractual or networking considerations.
Wait, planning. I mean, you really need to know what you're getting yourself into. You got to plan it, and you also need to know why you're getting into it. Just because somebody read something in CIO magazine and said, "Oh, the cloud's great. We need to move everything," but why? I mean, why are you doing it? Is there going to be a cost savings for you, or is there going to, what's the value in this?
So we're getting close to the end, so I want to make sure if there's questions in the audience that we get to them. But otherwise, we're at VMworld this week, and cloud changes a bunch of things. We talked about a bunch of pieces, but how does it affect put your end user hat on for those of you that are there or used to be there, your relationship with your vendors that you've worked with a while. I would love if you want to talk specifically about VMware, that's great, but in general, who's helping in this environment? Who needs to do more in this environment? Where do you turn to for this? Brian will give a good plug for iLand, I'm sure, yeah.
Well, I guess I'll start since you called me out.
Yeah.
a lot of it, when it comes to vendor management, we're used to having that sales rep. We know who to go to. We can go to that sales engineer and be like, I need some help and I need some technical help. Can you at least connect me with the right person if you don't know? Well, when we go to AWS, we go to Google, we may not have that level of relationship anymore. And that, again, that's part of that planning. It's part of understanding how much do we really need to have that level of contact. And that can help you decide which cloud provider to go with. Maybe for those transient type workloads, put that out in AWS as transient. If it goes away, we can spin it up somewhere else because we've kind of got it built to go wherever we need it to go. Today, it's cheapest to go to AWS, but maybe it's going to be Google next time. I don't need to talk to a sales rep for that. But maybe in other cases, I want to have somebody that's more running a cloud that's more of a higher touch, meaning I've got a phone number I can call and get to a person. I'm not being expected to log a ticket and then have some magical computer in the background figure it out and shoot you an email at the end on how to fix it. So that's definitely a part of the choice is when it comes to vendor management. You also pick VMware or Microsoft based on, partially based on the technology, but also on the people that you have to deal with. Should I go HPE or Dell? Well, some people make the decision because Dell takes them to more sushi lunches. It's a horrible reason to make a choice, but I've seen it. It happens.
I've seen that too. And the other thing I'd add to that is, let's be honest here. I'm not bashing Amazon, but if you call Amazon and say, I can't access this S3 storage, they don't really give a crap.
Can you call them?
If you can't.
Their website says, we don't have a phone number, please click here.
All right, so you can't even call them, even better. Whereas if you call a managed cloud provider who relies on your business and is in a smaller size, then they're at the perfect point where they've got the in-house skills, they've seen all the problems, they're proactively managing and troubleshooting it, and they actually care and can solve it, and you've got a contractual obligation, therefore, to get that fixed. So not plugging Island specifically, any cloud provider of that size, but that's, for me, where I'd look to use that sort of space is for that contract, for somebody can held liable in the event of it not working.
Yep.
Azure. That's all I got to say.
I guess.
Wait, is that Azure Stack, Office 365,
All
which,
of it.
yeah.
Well,
Yes.
think about it.
Free Xbox for everyone, I heard, no?
I wish. But think about it. Most people have enterprise agreements.
Yeah.
If you've got an issue with your Microsoft products, you're getting on the phone or you send an email to your TAM. And if something doesn't get resolved, it keeps getting escalated and escalated. When you have somebody like Microsoft, you can go to somebody and, at least get a voice and say, okay, we're working on it, or it's a bug or a feature. Yes, you can giggle with that. But there is somebody you can go to, where sometimes some of the cloud providers, like you said, it's just a button and, we're experiencing a problem.
Yeah,
I'm not saying that, Microsoft Cloud is perfect.
But they have a field.
Easier, yeah.
They have a field. There's people in the field that you can talk to, definitely.
I agree. And I'll just
David.
One thing,
yeah.
I've used Microsoft Cloud support, and they did call me within 3 minutes of raising a ticket. So
wow.
Yeah.
On the customer
that's
end,
faster than my teenagers. That's impressive.
I guess we've had all of those experiences. There's times when our customers need a different level of service. There's times when we've had to take workloads out of the public cloud and bring it back on premise because the support wasn't there. The wrong application got moved. The level of availability for the application wasn't designed appropriately. And when a cloud provider decided to do maintenance, mandatory maintenance, the application went down because they moved inadvertently and realized that the level of availability of the public cloud wasn't at a micro infrastructure level. It was at a macro level, but the application wasn't distributed in such a way that it could sustain that kind of availability. So the conversations you got at earlier about moving data, ingress and egress of data, we evaluated that very early and decided to sign up with a Microsoft Express route, for example, that prevented our costs to egress, which saved us a ton of cash because there were times that we had to move move workloads off-prem, and then we did have to move it back on for reasons of the customer made an oops. So it is very important to get that, understand that ahead of time before petabytes of data start shifting.
Yeah.
I think service, the customer service of your providers is a really big key. It's great if the cost is, it's going to be cheap. But what about the customer service? What if you have a problem? How long is it going to take? Is it going to take 3 minutes, 3 hours, or 24 hours? I mean, all that comes into play when you're deciding where you're going to go.
And
because you're going to go.
Sorry, the last thing, I don't think I actually answered your question, which is this is VMworld. and
Yeah.
you know, what should you be looking at?
Yeah.
So I think my opinion on this is that, you know, of all the different technologies here and everything that VMware is doing, anything that is being refreshed or put into a data center in 2018 onwards has to have cloud integrated to the point where it's just a couple of clicks and you can get data there, you can pull it back, and you can view and manage it all from the same control plane that you have for your on-premises infrastructure as you do the cloud. It should live and breathe the same, and it doesn't matter whether you're even using the cloud today for that task. The point is that you can extend it to that in the future when you next are asked, okay, we need to reduce our spend, we need to use the cloud more, we need digital transformation. Oh, great, I just did it for this, this, and this. So that's my core focus on what are all these technologies doing to enable cloud, and also the nuance. The devil's always in the detail. Like, yes, oh, I have cloud, but wait, how do I do that? Oh, I've got to put a whole new rack of kit in there and buy a cloud license to tier the data off. That isn't a cloud-ready solution. That's a hack job.
Any final questions from the audience? All right, I've got one question. I'd ask you to keep it short because we're running low on time. Want to give you one wish. You know, we're going to be back here in a year and going to say, boy, in the last year, multi-cloud got so much better because of this. So, going to give you the one wish.
My wish is that I could use a magic wand and point it at my vendors to make sure that they didn't build applications that weren't able to be distributed. Forcing our application vendors to distribute their applications to make them more resilient so that they could be moved on-premise or off and be able to sustain that kind of shift is huge. I'm a customer. I buy thousands of different applications, and some of those vendors don't shift. They don't have a proper vision, and I'm handcuffed by the limitations that they put me under. I'd like to wave that wand at them. That's what I want.
You're going to smack them in the head, it looks like, too, but yeah.
Yeah, and that, I guess I'm going to actually add a different one in mind, but I'm going to play off that because you made me think of another one that I think is potentially difficult, which is, I mean, we talked about it before, is that people really actually understand that there are multiple clouds. They do different things. There are advantages and disadvantages across all of them, and at every level, from us IT people down in the trenches all the way to those CEOs, CTOs, CFOs that, you know, are putting these requirements down on us. We'll really go into it with an open mind, I guess, be better educated about what the different clouds are, what your choices are in the cloud. It's not just Amazon, it's not just Azure, it's not just GCP. There are other options out there. They may not be as big and huge, but that doesn't make them a worse choice. It just means that they're different. They offer something different. And that, you know, the cost, you know, it's the amount I pay for this server versus the amount that I'm paying for 3 years in any given cloud may not be the same. But what's the total TCO across all that? What all do we gain or lose in both cases?
My one wish for next year is every single cloud Luddite in the world to retire. And a Luddite, blah, blah.
Blah, blah, cloud.
But you're not a Luddite, though. You like new technology. You're ready to embrace it. And there's still far too many conversations where it's we can't embrace the cloud in any shape or form. And you look at the new agile companies out there where if you said, do you want to buy this server, they'd say, what's a server? They're running all in cloud. They don't have an IT department. My wife works for a company with 100,000 customers and not a single VM, not a single EC2 instance, and only one person in IT for laptops. We got to kill the cloud Luddites.
Yeah, and just
oh no, sorry, make them retire. Kills harsh.
Yeah, quick story, just because last year at this show, I talked to a pretty large enterprise user, and he said, I've got my data center group, and they don't want to look at cloud. They don't want to talk about it. When I went to them and said VMware and AWS, they're like, oh, we can do that because it's VMware. And that was their, he's like, now they're in the cloud, and we're, well, a data center, co-located, you know, all that stuff. It's cloud-ish. But at least they were there. Just as Microsoft really helped enable a lot of this SaaS, I think VMware Cloud is going to help move a lot of people towards cloud movement. All right, give us the last wish.
My wish is better integration between the clouds.
Yeah.
Yep.
Have the clouds talk better to each other and on premises, because you know I don't want to say you're always going to have on premises, but someone's always going to have that presence there. So if you can all talk together, your applications, your business is going to be better.
All right. Well, please give all the panelists a big hand for participating. Thank you so much, everybody. And we're going to have VMware vSAN, you've got it.
Yep. Yeah, VMware vSAN's going to speak for a little bit.